Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. What are some unusual things your parents restricted you from doing as a kid? My crazy religious conservative father banned me from the most innocuous things growing up. I couldn't play any secular games on my NES unless there were those Christian based games that came on those baby blue or black cards. I couldn't watch any shows that didn't have a Christian theme. Listening to the radio was forbidden unless it was Christian talk radio or country music. If I violated any of these rules, I'd be hit across my back 20 times with the metal end of the belt. Thankfully, my mom finally divorced the psychopath when I was 10, and all his crazy rules went right out the window, so I could finally be a normal kid after that. Just wondering, are you Christian now? I know a lot of the time this type of brainwashing, so to speak, has the adverse effect. No, I now identify as atheist. For a while, I used to be a very outspoken anti-theist, but as I get older, I don't care what someone else believes as long as they are not hurting me with it. My parents handpicked my friends. I was not allowed to be friends with anyone they had not approved first. So far, this one annoys me the most. Can't imagine what it's like to have controlling parents like that. How did your parents enforce that? Did you just ignore that completely when at school, for example? They pretty much ran my life. It was like being in the military, only there was no paycheck and not enough R&R. My life was pretty much get up, eat breakfast, go to school and do class walk in all your classes, go home and eat supper, do homework, go to bed, repeat. We lived in a small town, and I was not allowed to hang out with friends without them knowing what friend, where we were going, and what we were doing. When I was allowed to go out, I had a limited amount of money and a curfew. The big excitement for me was a trip to the community sale. My father would always give me money to buy SF books, as we liked the exact same kind of books. That was usually a good plan, so I got a corn dog, a lemonade, maybe a soft pretzel, and a bag of books. I wouldn't have dreamed of lying to them or acting up, right up to the point where I finally lost it and ran away from home. Don't go out to play. Pedophiles are everywhere. Ignore statistics. Wait a minute, is that a haiku? Haiku confirmed. Playing pool. They considered it trouble with a capital T. And that rhymes with P and that stands for pool. Now I know all you folks are the right kind of parents. Fart. My mum's rule was if she was around we had to go outside or to the bathroom. My father used to smack the shit out of me if he heard me fart, even in another room. I still can't fart in front of people. I'm a shy fatter too. Was with a girl for 5 years, living together for 2, and she only heard me fart once in that whole time. I wasn't allowed to like dinosaurs. I had a religious dad who thought dinosaurs were wrong. At least he wasn't crazy enough to believe they didn't exist at all. He just didn't like how we're taught about how they existed for so long before us. It goes against the whole 6 days thing. Oddly enough though, he loved the Jurassic Park movies. That's not too odd, right? It depicts dinos and humans living side by side. Sorta. If you just ignore the science aspect of the film, it fits right in with his worldview. Plus there were kick-ass movies. Technically the Bible mentions animals that could be considered dinosaurs living alongside humans a number of times. I'm assuming religious implied Christianity. My parents would not allow me to eat butter, only margarine until I was 13. I think this has the most WTFY value. I'm starting to feel weird about my childhood. I have at least a dozen of these stories apply to me. I wasn't allowed butter until I was 14. I was forced to go to church every Sunday and go to every church activity, then be punished if I didn't. They ruined the church for me. I'm gonna become inactive when I move out. I'm only 18 and it took 10 years for me to realize they ruined it for me. It doesn't help that everyone in my church are the most judgmental people I've ever met. I was restricted on doing anything on Sunday or even watching TV on Sunday. Everything about being Mormon is restricting. I couldn't date till I was 16. Can't drink coffee or tea, and can't watch rated R movies. I was feeling the Mormon vibe and was going to ask if that was the church you were referring to. Then I read the rest and got my answer. I feel your pain. I grew up Mormon too. Halloween. It was unchristian, and despite me from an early age not identifying as such, I was still not allowed to participate. I just wanted to dress up. My co-worker said she didn't like Halloween because it is a pagan holiday. I informed her it was just as pagan as Christmas. She gave me hate eyes. I'm not atheist at all. I've never celebrated Halloween either. My mother doesn't agree with it. She didn't ban me exactly and would have let me do what I wanted once I was older, but I never cared about it or wanted to dress up or anything. It probably helped that some of my neighbors would bring me sweets without me having to go out. Mom was a cop. Wasn't allowed to attend sleepovers because she once worked a crime scene at a slumber party where a man had broken in and killed all the little girls. I feel for your mom on that one. She probably was traumatized after seeing that crime scene and couldn't bear the thought of putting her own little girl in the same situation. Fears are often irrational. I'm sure she logically knew that nothing was going to happen to you, but the anxiety she would have been experiencing would have been real. I once attended a slumber party and a man tried to break into the house. For a while my mom wouldn't let play PS2 during a thunderstorm. Her reasoning being that the electricity could travel through the power lines, into our home wires, through the surge protector, into the PS2, then through the controller cord and finally electrocute me. Thank God for those shitty third-party wireless controllers. We did the same thing, but it was more that the system could fry if there was a lightning strike. Happened to a friend of mine's N64 back in the day. Lightning erased my game save for Resident Evil on the Sega Saturn. I was at the end, so upset. I wasn't allowed to eat any meals with adults. I wasn't allowed to walk off the paths or lawns in the gardens. I wasn't allowed to participate in Halloween or Easter. If I grew past the recommended age in my father's mind for a toy, I didn't have many. They were secretly disposed of at night. God, the lists go on and on. A whole load. What? Why? In this post. Please elaborate. Please elaborate. I must know more. Most of the people in this thread had religious parents. Coincidence? It wouldn't surprise me if in a few years there be posts on here of kids not being allowed to have friends who are religious or allowed to watch films with gods or religious iconography, just in case they became corrupted by unscientific thinking. That would require the hardcore atheists on Reddit getting laid, so I don't think that'll happen. My mom was trying to have a baby at a pretty old age with her new husband, so she was on all kinds of hormones to try and help her. During this period I was not allowed into the basement in my house as punishment for throwing a yogurt container in the wrong trash bin, not allowed to touch the walls. Not sure why this was a rule, but it suddenly became tempting. Not allowed to park my car in front of our house. Didn't think my car looked good enough to be associated with our house. Salting my food. My dad had this weird notion that any amount of salt added to food would very quickly and negatively impact our health. I salt the shit out of my food now. Do you love bacon? Your dad sounds like my hypochondriac grandmother. I wasn't allowed to watch the Power Rangers or Captain Planet. When I asked my mom about it later in life, she told me it was because the shows were so unbearably dumb she was afraid they would lower my IQ. My husband wasn't allowed to watch Gumby as a child. Captain Planet and Power Rangers were fine though. I couldn't talk to girls until 8th grade. What, really? So what do you do in that sort of situation whenever you cross paths with them? They couldn't control me at school, and I learned that from 4th grade. I had my first secret girlfriend in 6th grade. I was not allowed to watch Barney the dinosaur. Apparently it was on TV one time and my mother heard Barney say something like, "Make sure all the parents are out of the room. I have a secret." And my mother was like, "Nope, no more of this shit." Really, that was the only rule. My parents were pretty easygoing. I think I may actually agree with that. What was the secret? Barney knows a special grown-up game, but you can't tell anybody about it or you'll get in trouble. Couldn't watch Power Rangers or collect Pokemon, because both were violent. If you think about it, Pokemon is actually really disturbing. Forcibly taking animals from their environment, keeping them in inhumanely small containers and making them fight other mistreated animals until one collapsed. Yep, it's pretty messed up. Dating someone that wasn't black. Literally, she told me if I brought anyone home who wasn't black that she would purposely treat them awful and run them away from our home. This would be funnier if you weren't black. Jethro, you gotta deplete their genital. Call science. This is an extremely depressing thread. Some of them are more rage-inducing than depressing. Join our community Discord, link in description. When I was little, my dad banned me from eating any food with a B in its name. For example, bananas. What the hell? Why? It stopped after I turned 12 or so. I think it was just some kind of stupid joke between my parents. Still pretty weird though. Chew gum. Fake tattoos. Watching MTV. While I agree I shouldn't have been watching MTV at the age of 5, at 13 or so you should be able to. Sleepovers. Because I was going to get raped, my mom had to fight for me to sleep over at my friend's house at 13. Not being a hyper-conservative Republican. Harry Potter out and now I'm too old to read it. You're never too old for Harry Potter. Definitely not too old. My parents read it to us when I was younger, but eventually my mom just ended up reading the books herself. We couldn't say the word poop. Same. My mom considered it a swear word. Couldn't say penis, poop, whizzing, peeing, rear, in the context of ass, butt, vomit, puke as they were all very bad swear words. Had to say dookie, winky, tinkle, bottom, and cough up. Poop. I wasn't allowed to watch shows like Rocko's Modern Life, Rugrats, Cat Dog, Ren and Stimpy and the likes of that because they were disgusting. I was basically only allowed to watch Scooby-Doo and Looney Tunes and stuff like that. Honestly, now that I'm older and watching some of these older cartoons, I completely agree with my mother about keeping me away from those shows. They're ducking disgusting. This backfired though because to this day, I still can't stand to watch Looney Tunes or Scooby-Doo. I understand all of them but Rugrats taught me a lot about using my imagination. So many memories. My mom hated Cat Dog, too, but didn't mind the others for some reason. I was never allowed to watch Teletubbies. My mom didn't like the way they talked and didn't want me learning to talk like them so I wasn't allowed to watch it. Other than that my parents were pretty cool. Long ago, I had a babysitter who didn't allow her children to watch that show. I remember being like, hey Teletubbies is on, and their daughter said something like, we don't watch that show in this house. I just remember thinking how odd that was. I remember I was too old for Teletubbies but my aunt had a 2-year-old at the time, and she came to visit and we went out to dinner. I was about 8, and I vividly remember her telling my parents this story about how one of the Teletubbies had allegedly said, and she spelled it out like this to avoid me hearing. But I was too sharp for GGOT. I remember thinking that I had no idea what that meant and it wasn't until maybe 4 to 5 years later that I ever heard the word again. I still wonder if they actually said anything that sounded like that word. There was a period of about a year when I was maybe 9 or 10 that I was not allowed to refer to my parents as mom and dad. It was strictly enforced that I call them mom and sir. They would ignore me otherwise. What's even more weird is we have literally never discussed it. They've never told me why or what I did. I wasn't a bad kid at all, but I had my moments like all kids. One day my mom said, you may call me mom, and it just went away from there. ETA. My relationship with them as an adult is totally normal. They're regular people. My dad played in a rock band and my mom worked too. They both liked barbecues and watching The Biggest Catch. I had an otherwise normal childhood so I just edit again. I finally asked my mom. She started laughing and then said all parents do it. It's a sign of respect and you weren't showing any respect. All parents do it. Okay, I guess now I know. They probably read some parenting book then decided it was ducking stupid. Eating with my left hand. I wasn't allowed to listen to any music made after 1989 until the year 2007. Explain? My dad considered it the best music ever, and it was all that was listened to. The only station was the 80s station. Only CDs were 80s CDs. The exception was movies. I've seen Red Dawn about 1 billion times. I was to not make any friends whatsoever on school. My father believed that being friendly was a sign of weakness and that making friends will only end in despair for me as they would all stab me in the back. He once threatened to disown me at school if I were seen talking to anyone, period. To this day my father and I still are not on talking terms, but perhaps that is simply me following his teachings on not having friends. Until the age of 9 or 10, I wasn't able to go out after dinner to play with friends or classmates. Instead, my father had me work on mathematics texts and drills until 9:30 p.m. Only after he started working late and I realized other kids didn't have to put up with the same did I manage to escape. From middle school to high school, I, as one might expect, found mathematics pretty easy. However, in college, I developed almost a phobia of it, and to this day, I am most definitely not a quant type. I wonder whether this was a product of my forced upbringing or perhaps my father understood I needed all that extra tutoring. My parents were very controlling. They'd screen any friends who'd come over based on what their parents did for a living as well as their level of education. MD PhDs went to the top of the list. I once made the mistake of bringing over a new friend, slightly older, who was captain of my cycling team, what one would classify as a colored in Africa, which is where he and his family were from, as he proudly described how his mother, an experienced seamstress, had helped create his team cycling jersey. I watched in horror as my parents basically interrupted him and dismissed him from their presence. I couldn't eat nuts. I wasn't allergic. They just didn't want me eating them for some reason. My parents have always disapproved of video games. I played Assassin's Creed 2 in secret when I was maybe 15 or 16. It was the first video game of any kind I ever played. My parents know that I play games now, but they still heavily disapprove, so I try to do it when they are not around. Why is that? People can get addicted and spend too much time playing games. And to my dad, everything without educational value is a waste of time. If I ever do badly on a test, my mom will blame it on video games and says I should have been studying instead, even though I play once a week on average and for 3 hours at a time maximum. I came home from school one day after a long, stressful week and started playing TF2. My mom saw and started yelling at me, annoyed that as soon as I got home I went straight to games. I hadn't played anything for a week and I told her so. We argued for a bit, and since I was stressed to begin with, I burst into tears, and when I looked up and she'd left. We weren't allowed to watch The Three Stooges because they were too violent. My mom wouldn't allow me to watch Beavis and Butthead, but when she was gone I watched it with my dad all the time. They are fairly violent. However, it was all so silly. Going out to hang out with people after 4:30 p.m. during the week. It was odd because I was 16. No shock, I started rebelling hardcore after a while. They get almost livid when they see people eating with hats on. I don't honestly know what their reasoning was, other than it's rude. My grandfather allegedly had a fit, and still discusses to this day, about that one time my dad's bum friend wore a hat in church in 1982. To be fair, my dad's bum friend is a bum. I wasn't allowed to eat peppermints. I had them twice, then ran around like the hyper child I was and they got lodged in my throat. After the second time, my parents and I had a serious talk about how I need to avoid peppermints for a while. I can eat them now, but I rarely do. They always remind me of the Heimlich haha. For some reason when I was little my mom was against Harry Potter, SpongeBob and Pokemon. All of a sudden, I'm not sure when it started, she was fine with these. My dad made my mom watch Star Wars when they first got married, because every good American needs to watch Star Wars. Well, my mom had never seen a movie that was when remotely violent, so it like totally scarred her, specifically when Alderaan was destroyed, when Obi-Wan died, and when Luke's aunt and uncle were found burned. This movie horrified her so much that she made a decree that none of her children would be able to watch Star Wars until they were 9 years old. My dad had no say in it, so all of us had to wait until we were 9 goddamn years old to watch Star Wars. And by that point we already knew what happened because of games, toys, etc. The funny thing is that my dad let us watch Terminator, Lord of the Rings, and Predator when we were like 8. And because my mom had never seen them, my dad could just lie about what they were about. So yeah, that was always funny. My grandmother didn't allow my mom to leave the dinner table unless she finished all her milk, and if she didn't finish her milk, my grandmother would pour the milk on my mom's head. My mom let me drink, smoke, run around anywhere, hang out with guys 10 plus years older than me. Basically I did whatever I wanted, but she drew the line at riding in a VW Bug, because that shit was way more dangerous than buying her 13 years old daughter alcohol and letting her hang out with 23 years old men. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.